Hi, everyone. Welcome to our second episode, part of the Unstuck Leader Series. I'm Nadira Ramtran, President and CEO of NRNY Consulting and founder of Unstuck Leader. Today, joining us is Jessica Pulley, who is my best friend, my soul sister, a former colleague, just someone who is super amazing in my life. And I'm so grateful that she took time out today to join us and share more about her stuck to unstuck leader story. So, Jessica, I'd love for you to just share a little bit about yourself. What are you doing now? And then we can get to like the nitty gritty stuff.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me, Nadira. So right now I work in higher ed. I work as a director of operations at an institution. But prior to that, I'm approaching 2 years in this role. Prior to that, though, I spent my career in K through 12 nonprofit education. And if you asked me 10 years ago when I was starting my career in K through 12, I never thought I was going to transition into higher ed. And my journey is really all about figuring out your skills and figuring out how those skills become transferable. And so this role is the first time that, even though education is very similar, right? K through 12 and higher ed are not polar opposites because students have to come from somewhere into
Mm-hmm.
higher education. But I would say that it's the first time that I got a job truly because of the transferable skills in
Mm-hmm.
roles and responsibilities that I've held in previous roles. And so
Mm-hmm.
it was new. And it's also the first time that I have entered at a certain level and haven't done any of the work that I manage in my portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
So that was also a new experience.
Awesome. And so, just to get us started, because these episodes are really short, so I want us to pack in as much as possible, so that we can create a lot of value for our audiences. Can you share with us an experience where you felt stuck, and it could be in any part of your life? And then, what were some strategies that you implemented that would be also useful for others to implement as you move from like being stuck to unstuck?
Just one. Um, I feel like I've had so many moments of stuckness, like just a sense of what is next. But a critical point in my career was I was in my last organization where I spent 5 years. My
Mm,
prior organization before that, I was there for 3 years. And so, um, in my last organization, I was at really like a middle ground in my career and learned a lot, was able to kind of gain a lot. But I reached a point where I was in my role for approaching 2 years. Um, and I was feeling that plateau. I was pretty much like a project manager, program manager, um, not supervising any staff members. So definitely feeling in a rut with kind of exhausted with all of the projects and programs to manage. I wanted to go back into managing people, and I felt that the things that I kind of took away so that I could focus on grad school, I quickly knew that I was approaching the end of grad school and wanted those things
mm,
back to just grow more as a professional. And
mhm,
so at that time, though, I didn't necessarily see an immediate pathway, and there wasn't necessarily an immediate pathway, like a role or a track that I had on my team. I loved my
mhm,
team, loved the growth opportunity. But what I was able to do is look at the gaps that I saw in the organization.
mm,
So at that time, there was a ton of organization transition and restructuring. And so rather than using that opportunity to kind of demand what I felt that I deserved, I found the gaps and I
mm,
was strategic about how I could fill them, right? So
mm,
I knew that it was a gamble, though, right? I was kind of risking the fact that I saw a gap in work, that I'm kind of like, hey, I'm going to take this on, or I've identified that this is not being covered. Let me fill in here, right? But I also used it as an opportunity to kind of re-sculpt my own role, right? It was
mhm,
a transitional time where everyone was focused on doing what needed to be done, and so, by doing so and filling in those gaps, I was able to kind of shift my role into being not just project focused, but having this kind of like indirect management ability or
mm,
exercise my strategic thinking to say, hey, have you all thought about this?
mhm,
And I realized something early on then, that just because you have leaders above you, it does not mean that they're thinking about all things, especially the
mhm,
minutia of like day to day project management, program management, operations. they're very strategic and in the clouds and looking at the 50,000-foot view. And so I was able to swoop in and say, I see that you're looking at this. Have you thought about this? And so able to kind of demonstrate and exercise my leadership voice in a way that wasn't necessarily seen previously. And in doing so and kind of earning that trust and respect, able to start to sculpt my role to own different things. The one kind of blowback on that approach was that it meant that I was doing work for, an undefined amount of time with no immediate gratification. So I would say that's the risk in doing that. But the opposite to that, like the contradictory argument was that regardless of whether or not I had a pathway in that organization, I was gaining tangible experiences and resume builders for myself. And so that was the concession that I made with myself. Like, even if you cannot stay here, even if you don't see a growth pathway, you're gaining experiences, and just be true to yourself about how long you want to continue to invest in yourself in this organization without them investing back in you.
You answered some of the questions that I was going to ask you, because soul sister vibes,
right?
Sometimes we want to take on more, and we know that organizations won't pay us more right away, so like that instant gratification. But I think that there's so much value in like building up your experiences, adding items to your resume, and just really feeling like your voice is included by advocating for yourself. And so what were some specific, like, just say 2 to 3, I don't know, statements or like or ways that you advocated for, maybe like a higher salary at some point, or for adding some very specific items to your current role? Not the current role, but the role that you were in at that time.
For sure. So again, I think I took the liberty of taking my job description and then I just marked that puppy up to say, what am I actually doing and how does that differ from what I did previously, right? And I think that was the first fodder to say, okay, there has been enough, just from a human resources perspective, there has been enough significant change in what I was hired to do and what I am now doing comfortably and that you all love me doing, that this actually demonstrates like some sort of change, whether it be change in compensation, yes, please, or at minimum change in title, right? So again, I think sometimes as women of color, we are always a little bit afraid of pushing the needle. And salary negotiation is something that intimidated the hell out of me in each step of my career. And I've had really good mentors that have given me tips and tricks to do that. So, under their guidance, so the first step is like, put on paper the work you're doing, because that's one thing that you can't hide. You can't diminish that. And then once you have a demonstrated evidence of the work that you've done, proven success metrics, and then that opens up the conversation to actually talk about, given this and given that there's, my role will continue to be what we've morphed it into, how can we talk about that translating into a different title for acknowledgement? And then how can we translate that into, increased compensation, given that my role has drastically changed with more leadership or more, right? Like, it's not that it changed because I was an administrative aide for one person and then became an administrative aide for another one, while I would still argue that deserves increased compensation, but like significant changes where I had more informal and formal leadership, kind of management and oversight of one staff member when I didn't have that before. So enough changes that I knew that I had the fodder to say, let's talk about this. And I had, I don't want to diminish the fact that I had trusted allies. Like, my manager and I had a really great working relationship. I was both an advocate for myself, but she was also an advocate. Her manager was also an advocate. So it is difficult to go about doing these things when you don't have all of that support. However, if you start in the facts and you start with that job description, no one can refute that, where you're like, this is what you hired me to do. This is what I'm doing today. And these are all of the kudos you give for my work, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so what are some challenges that you currently face, right? Like, because I know that you've moved from like being entry level to being a mid-level manager, and now as senior leader, like what, challenges are you currently facing? And then I think for those who may be struggling with defining a career path for themselves, especially given you know, the times that we're in, like, how do you stay focused? Like, how do you continue to build? How do you continue to stay motivated?
Whew. I look forward to episode 3 when you have someone that's able to, impart some wisdom. But no, I would say right now, so the interesting part of where I am now is that, my institution is very large. And so I work in a department that is about 50 staff members, but my immediate
Mhm.
team is super, I always say we're small but mighty.
Mhm.
So I would say some of the challenges that I currently face are just a function of where we are in the world as a result of this pandemic, right? So I have a vacancy that I cannot hire for as of yet because we're in a hiring freeze. I
Mhm.
have a time limited position that was always time limited when we started approximately 2 years ago, but it's slated
Mhm.
to end this summer with no potential for renewal because of
Mhm.
the way we request time limited positions from a budget perspective. In addition,
Mhm.
my colleague is fantastic and he's moving into a PhD program. So regardless, I was losing that person, which is actually what I care more about, losing the person and not necessarily the role.
Mhm.
So, my current challenge is that I'm going to be a team of 2 come September 1. And functionally, I have my colleague who oversees our systems and technology. But then on the data assessment, budget, finance side, it's just me. And so in my
Mhm.
mind, I'm starting to, not even starting to, have spent the last couple of months managing expectations for what
Mhm.
those job functions will look like with a team of 2. Even if I
Mhm.
scale up or ask for additional support from my systems admin within his scope of responsibilities and wheelhouse. But the reality is that there's when you have a team of 4 and you go to a team of 2, it's different.
Mhm.
So I think that's the most immediate thing on the horizon. And the other just general challenges are just now being in this, I sometimes still feel like a middle manager because within my department I'm a senior leader, but
Mhm.
greater bureaucracy, it's like I feel like I'm a little ant. um, but balancing both keeping my motivation, like resilience in this pandemic,
Mhm.
resilience in a time of civil unrest when
Mhm.
police brutality and kind of this culture of white supremacy has just reared its ugly head, and people are like,
Mhm.
time's up. So there's definitely been days where I have felt beat down and unable to do the work. What I will
Mhm.
say has saved me is having a very strong people culture, a supportive
Mhm.
manager again, having
Mhm.
a listening ear, and just being intentional when I decide to speak or ask for things. People listen because I don't always exercise that ability. I don't always complain, even if I have a complaint. I save some of them so that when I do
Mhm.
speak, people feel more receptive to a solution or
Mhm.
to hear me. Um,
Right.
yeah, it's difficult maintaining yourself and maintaining your colleagues and your direct reports, and also just like being a support person, within my own office. Um,
Mhm.
but I would say that the way that I've addressed it is like building strong relationships from the gate in my role, and or in any role. I think is one of the strongest attributes anyone can
Mhm.
attain,
Yeah.
because those were that relationship capital is far more important than other, like you don't have to be the formal leader. I always encourage everyone, cozy up to the executive assistant. That person has so much authority within that office, right?
Mhm.
Or the office manager. So some of these
Yeah.
roles that are considered support are the most powerful roles that you need
Mhm.
to know. You need to have
Yeah.
their respect and you need to be their allies, right?
Yeah.
Because those are the folks that also see everything and
Mhm.
are working kind of operationally in the office, right? So I feel like
Yeah.
from the gate, I wanted to ensure that I was methodical in building relationships with every team other than my own that I was managing.
Yeah. And that's a really great segue into one of my final questions is what are some core competencies, maybe 3, that are very transferable no matter what role you get into, and as you or as someone is thinking about making their way up to like a senior leadership role, what are 3 transferable core competencies or skills? Maybe it is more than just skills, but that they need, like, people can like build on or
Yeah.
like really enhance so that they're getting to that next level.
Oh man, this I feel like this is just like such a loaded question. There's so many. There's probably far more
Mm-hmm.
than 3, but I would say, you know, you and I both have hired a good number of people also in our careers, even when we were kind of like lower level, right? And I feel like the things that I always look for are not always whether or not someone has like the hard skills in a prior role, right? So the first thing that I look for is someone who can demonstrate experience, that they've been teachable and that they're willing to learn, right? Because for most of the things that we're specifically in my role, right, like operations, it's not rocket science. In fact, it's not for medicine, right? So there's a lot of the things that I'm doing, like it's, you know, there's always a learning curve. There's the ability to seek out professional development, whether it be free or, you know, specific trainings to grow someone wherever there are gaps. But they must be teachable and must be willing to learn and want to do the work that you hired them to do. I would say that's important.
Yep,
So make
for
sure when
sure.
you apply to jobs that you are okay with being asked to do the items that are in that job description.
Exactly.
So I would say that, yeah, so being teachable and willing to learn. Also effective communication, both written and verbal. And I think it's very critical. And I think that transcends the ability to not only like write well in a professional way, not only articulate the message you want to see, want to say, articulate yourself in an interview, right? So, you know, honing your skills on the ability to just convey a message is critically important. But it also just supports you in every stage of your career, right? Whether you're interviewing, whether you're looking for a job, whether you're growing in your own organization, you
Yes.
have to be able to communicate
And
effectively.
I just want to add on to the communication piece is that, yes, like we want it to be well written and professional. And I think also there's a piece about just like being very reflective
Mhm.
when you're about to write, right? So going through this process of like, who is this message for? How do I want this message to sound? Just sort of like questioning yourself before you send that email or, you know, you write that letter to someone. Um, and so I think just creating a process for yourself so that you're setting yourself up for success.
Agree. Like checking your tone, audience, right? Know all of those things before you send a message, because sending a message to your peers to get buy-in is different from advocating for yourself to your manager, and the tone should be different,
Exactly.
right? Yep. Your thank you email to the folks you interview with is different from an email that you would send kind of informally. But yeah, I agree with
Right.
that. And I guess not the last competency, but I've been seeing an increased need and desire of organizations to just see someone who's kind of like agile, right? So part of that is like the learning and teachable thing. But one tangible competency that I think increasingly most employers want across industries is someone who's data driven or has the ability to kind of be strategic or analyze data in some sort of way, right? And I think being able to do, and data, it can mean quantitative or qualitative, but that hard skill of data analysis and the competency to do so exposes a lot of kind of other sub skills and competencies that I think a lot of employers are looking for in today's market, right?
Yeah.
Shows your ability to set yourself apart and to make decisions that are grounded in something and not just like your gut, which I also believe that a lot of decisions, especially as you become a leader, are your gut. Like you feel
Uh-huh.
that feeling, but also
Yeah.
you're like, does the data tell me to do this? So I think that for folks that are feeling like they want to grow in something, if you want to expose yourself to kind of data analysis or data reporting or qualitative and quantitative measures of data, that it would be something to look into. And I think that it's a very competitive skill that many folks are interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to highlight one additional competency that you shared a little bit more about, which I thought was really great. It's like being a relational
Mm,
leader or like building relationships. And I think that um, sometimes we second guess ourselves or we overthink things. And so you just want to really just be authentic, transparent, and really care about building relationships because you never know, or like at least getting to know people. People won't know who you are or what you want if you don't share more about yourself. So I think just opening up a little bit more is fine. Um, and of course, like being able to share some personal things, right? Like so people know that you're a human being
right.
and not just like this person who's, you know, doing the work, but they want to get to know the person behind the work.
Right.
So I really appreciate hearing more about just like the relationship aspect and the importance of it as you grow and navigate through your career.
Yeah.
So I do have these table topics
Okay.
And I'm going to pull one card out,
Okay.
and I don't know what these cards say. I don't like go through them.
Lord.
So it's just like a random card
Okay.
with a question. So the question is, what song do you wish you'd written? Speaking of written
Lord.
communication.
What song do I wish I'd written? This is so deep. I wish I'd written. Um, in solidarity of this lovely women's empowerment movement and wave that we've been on, I'm gonna go with "I'm Every Woman" by
Hmm.
Whitney Houston. I wish I'd written that song. Yeah,
Also, that is a really great song.
you know, it's a great song, great message. It lives
Hmm.
on. It's ageless.
Absolutely.
So
Yes,
yeah, I would love to take that one.
indeed. All right. Awesome. Maybe you can hear you sing it one day on like a future episode.
Indeed, after a glass of wine, would love to do that for you.
Well, thank you so much for being our guest on episode 2 of Unstuck Leader Series. I'm so thankful for your gems and your strategies and just all that you've been able to share with us. Of course, I wish that we've had more time, and I welcome you back on future episodes. I know that we'll want to pull a little bit more from you and create some more value for our audience. And so I'm going to post this and share a little bit more about Jessica bio. If you want to connect with her, you can certainly do so on social media. So thank you, Jessica. Bye, everyone. Until next time.
Bye, everyone.